Hello and welcome to another episode of VO Life, brought to you by Gravy for the Brain Oceania. Today, it's the Gravy for the Brain interview. And we've got Kirsty Gilmore this week, who is a voice director, sound designer, works heavily in the gaming industry. She's a Kiwi based in London and has worked on some pretty huge voiceover titles, one of which is coming out later. I think it's about next year. It's Baldur's Gate 3. Here's a little bit of a clip.
Your head throbs and your skin tingles. Visions rush past. A dragon's wing, a silver sword, and a flash of your face seen through the strange woman's eyes.
Oh, my head. What is this? Squall, you are no thrall. Vlaakith blesses me this day. Together, we might survive. Imps block the path forward. You will assist me in destroying them. We must reach the helm before we transform. We carry Mind Flayer parasites. Unless we escape, unless we are cleansed, our bodies and minds will be tainted and twisted. Within days, we will be Geich, Mind Flayers.
Pretty impressive stuff. So welcome to the podcast, Kirsty.
Thank you so much. Really, thank you for inviting me. Really pleased to be here.
No problem. So you're based in London at the moment. How's the second round of lockdown going there? How's it living in London?
Oh, it's fabulous. We're loving it. Yeah, it's amazing. Probably the less said about that, the better. But I'm really, really lucky in the fact that the industries that I work in, obviously voiceover, but also gaming and audio drama, all of my work has pretty much adapted over the year to be remote. And I'm very fortunate about that the industries I work in have adapted quite relatively quickly to being remote. And obviously I'm incredibly grateful for that because it's enabled me to work during first lockdown, although there was a bit of instability at the start for a few weeks, and now the second lockdown as well. We are due to come out of lockdown, I think tomorrow. I don't know, our government's a little bit hazy on the details, shall we say. I still don't really understand the tier 2 and 3 thing, but as good as can be expected, I think is probably the best way to describe it.
Fair enough, yeah. And the rest of the world says, oh, isn't it terrible being locked inside in a small room? And voiceover artists go, and we've been doing it all along.
I know. Although you do see all these tweets from people, and I know that a lot of the actors that I work with, because I've been doing all my directing remotely, and a lot of the actors, we were able to open studios, and studios are still open commercially. They were able to open in kind of sort of May, June kind of time, and they've been open through then with a lot of safety procedures, a lot of COVID-19 procedures in place, both in the UK and the US. And a lot of the actors I work with are very much like, oh, thank God, I'm out of my own studio. I get to work in somebody else's studio. This is so nice. Which is, So, I mean, it's been brilliant that everybody's been able to work, but I think we all it's just the fact that it's great that you can work in your own space, but to be able to go to a different space is also quite a nice thing as well.
Cool. So as I mentioned before, you're a voiceover artist yourself, but you work right around the space in terms of like directing voice, designing sound, and also casting voices. Could you just go through each of those and just like, because we think we know what they mean, but maybe we don't sort of have a full understanding of what those roles entail?
Sure. Okay. Well, obviously VO artist, so I won't really cover that. But as a VO artist myself, I work because I work in New Zealand and Australian accents, mainly with a little bit of RP. I do whatever anybody will throw at me essentially, but I do a lot of audiobooks. I do games, I do commercials, I do corporate, whatever anybody wants. In terms of directing, I am a voice director for games and audio drama and animation. And essentially that's what you would imagine any kind of a director to be, but just character directing. So my responsibilities as a director for games involves directing the sessions with actors. I work both. Pre-COVID, I worked with actors in studios directing them. Now I work remotely. Sometimes it's just voice direction and it's just me directing the voices. Sometimes for games, I work with a motion director as well, a performance director. and it's a combination. There's two of us directing somebody's performances if the performance is mocapped, for example. So I will, on my sort of on a day-to-day basis, I might be directing just me. I might be directing with another director beside me, or remotely beside me, as it were, at the moment. And it's also, but directing is also very much about liaising with other members of a team. So I do a lot of liaison for games, particularly with producers, with audio people for games, sound designers, dialogue editors. I also do a lot of liaison with writers. A lot of my job as a director involves prepping. So it's not just rocking up, telling the actor how to sound nice. It's very much how to, I do a lot of prep for my scripts beforehand. I have to be really, particularly with games, things can change on a daily basis. I have sessions where I start off with one with thinking I'm going to direct these 3 characters, and then 20 minutes before the session starts, they throw another 2. So I have to very quickly look at those scripts, make sure they're okay, and then make sure the actor's okay with it. And I think another added element of the job during these COVID times very much is just the ability to be able to cross that big divide of remote directing and making an actor feel comfortable in a different space without being able to see them. And a lot of the actors I work with, particularly on some of the long running games, I've worked with for over a period of time, and we know each other, which is great. But every new game that I work on, I'm re-establishing a relationship with actors that I possibly haven't worked on, but worked with before. So that's really important as well. I think that real human factor is something we totally took for granted before COVID as directors. And now we're having to establish it remotely, and it takes on a whole new nuance of meaning. So like, telling actors, shaping a performance, taking performance in a different way, giving performance nuance, working with an actor to create the performance is definitely the major part of the job. But on top of that, I have so much else that I do for as part of my directing job that feeds into that.
That's so interesting, because like from my perspective, I've started sort of directing commercial voiceover, and this conversation is just serving to remind me that the difference between like commercial voiceover, or sort of like voiceover work, versus character voice is just like a massive difference. It's it's kind of the difference between like writing a magazine article and writing like a fictional audiobook. Like it's just absolutely separate parts of the brain. Because like you say, like with the commercial voiceover stuff, it's literally rocking up and saying what you think of someone's voiceover work. There's no kind of backstory. Whereas, the like you say, the fictional, the character stuff, it's so much more in depth, and there's so much more glue that has to hold the whole process together.
And the bigger the game, that it's about how those characters fit into the process as well. So I have to talk to the writers and not only establish, like, in this particular scene, what were you actually going for here? What is going on in the game at this point? So not only that, but also, how can I direct this so it's appropriate for this character arc? If this is a character that a player might have potentially have been at this point in the game, potentially might have been playing with, or being around for 20 hours or 30 hours or 100 hours, how has their character arc changed at this point in the game? And I mean, some of the games I work on are enormous. They're enormous, they're huge, and some of the games I work on are very, very small. But it's still the same kind of process that we go through. And I think every time I approach a different character, I'm thinking about what voice do we have an established convention for this character? If it's a fantasy game, and fantasy games do a lot of races, you've got elves and you've got gnomes and you've got dwarves and et cetera. Do we have something established for that that actor has to fit into? Or are we inventing something completely new? Do we know what kind of accent they want? Do we have is there something particularly about an audition that the client really, really liked? Is this consistent with other people in this character's family, in this character's race, in this character's village, blah blah blah? So that's all. I mean, I'm working on a lot of different levels to make sure, and that's even before I get to the performance of actually being with the actor and going okay, so this is what we're going to do today. I've also discovered a really, especially working remotely as well, being able to sum up what's going on, like here's a 1-minute overview of this game. Here we go. Just being able, I think, I was told by a voice director who I really, really respect, Adele Cutting, who runs Sound Cuts. She said something in a panel that we were on, saying that she felt the 10 minutes at the start of a session where you establish rapport with your actor are incredibly important. I think she called them the golden 10. potentially. But I've always taken that on board and gone, yeah, that's really important to have that. If you're going to be working with an actor for 4 hours, which is the standard length of a standard game session, particularly if you know that actor, you might be working with them for like 40 hours. You know, there could be another 9 sessions or 20 sessions, or, you know, God only knows. It's really important to kind of establish it, not just at the start when you meet them for the first time, but also every single session to go, hey, how are you feeling today? Particularly at the moment, you know, particularly somebody's just had to travel 2 hours to come in. Somebody was coughing next to them on public transport. They felt really aware of that. You know, that is something that I'm super aware of, you know, making sure that the actor now feels that when they're in their session, they're in a safe space, not just physically, because that's really important, but also emotionally as well, that they can, if we spend the first 10 minutes of them telling me that, you know, they had a horrible journey and they just, you know, everything was just a little bit much, I have to kind of, you know, you do have to allow time for that to kind of, you know, realize that everybody's human and this is a really weird situation we're all in. And that if I'm then going to have to, in the next 4 hours, you're going to have to scream for me and cry for me and break down for me, because that's what the character takes, then we really need to trust each other. You need to feel you can give me all that emotions and be really open and raw. Otherwise, I'm not going to get the performance I need.
Absolutely. Because, like, I mean, one of the things that I just keep reiterating to people is that if you don't give like 110, if you don't fully commit to that character, then people can hear that straight away, especially in the world of gaming, because people are listening so intently, right? You know. So how do you make people at ease to be able to give that 110% of themselves?
I think I tell them who I am to start with, because we've all been in sessions where you're just like, you've rocked up and there's like, oh, we've got 3 people down the line from, you know, from South Africa or wherever. The client's in Leicester and somebody else is in, you know, somebody else is in Brisbane. And you're just like, I don't know who's talking to me in my ear, and nobody introduces themselves. And we've all had that as voice artists, and it sucks. So I make sure at the start that I say who I am. I give them like a really brief background of who I am. I tell them about the game. I ask them if they've got any questions, if there's anything they want to clarify. Sometimes they may have got part of the script in advance. Sometimes they may have had no script in advance. You know, make sure if there's anything that they feel uncomfortable with, make sure that they, you know, tell them, look, this is a session. We are going to go at a certain pace, but it's really important that you feel that you can answer any questions, and just try to really put someone at ease through my voice, because they can't see me. So I often make a joke. It's pretty clear whether people laugh in sympathy or not, but I quite like that. I mean, I'm quite like, I'm very, a lot of the games I work with have very strict, you know, we have to get a certain amount done in time. We have to keep to word counts. We have, you know, deadlines to hit, and we have a certain amount of lines to record in a particular space of time. But I think it's really important to make sure that an actor, you don't, even if you're feeling really stressed as a director, not to project that onto the actor. So sometimes when I'm directing, I've got the actor, I'm talking to the actor, I'm trying to do a session, and I've got 3 different people emailing me or WhatsApp or Slack. I've got the producer and the writer and the publisher all going, we need this. Oh, we've got to add this. Do you mind if we just get an extra one of this? We've just got another character for them to do. Do you think they can do it or not? Do you think they can do a Welsh accent? Can you just ask them? And I've got all this happening while I'm going to someone, that was really great. Could we do it again? But this time, can you just be a little bit brighter at the end? You know, and I've got, so just having to be able to kind of paddle under the surface and keep it going. But I would say just humor's really useful, unless you know, the actor doesn't have a sense of humor, which has happened. But I would say humor's really a really useful tool, and just making sure that they know you're a person too. You're there to help them be a nice person, you know,
make it a safe space.
Exactly, make it a safe space, and realize when people are new to it as well. I always try and get to know up front from a client, is the person coming in that I'm directing today, are they new to games? Because if they've never done any game acting before, then there is a whole other bit of stuff I will add on top of that to make them feel okay about it. Because actors want to please, and that's totally, I totally understand that. But if you throw a lot of jargon at an actor who doesn't understand it, that's really overwhelming. And I also want actors to understand they don't need to know the jargon. Like, you know, I can say, right, well, we've got 2 NPCs and then some NSVs at the end, but don't worry, this is just for the DLC, you know. And I mean, that all means something to me, but you know, an actor who's not into games be like, and the immediate reaction is, am I supposed to know that? Is that what this is going to be like?
Takes the wind out of their sails, doesn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. So I would say just putting people at their ease, being human about it, and just, especially in these times, just understanding that people are going through a lot. And that although actors are going to be incredibly happy to be in the studio and working, they're also possibly processing a lot of other stuff at the same time. You know, are they safe? Are their families safe? What happened? You know, their mum's just gone into hospital with COVID. What is that going to mean? And I think at the moment, because I work with people all over the world, I keep an eye on global news at the moment just to see what people's kind of situation is like in different countries. So I know, like I had clients when they were going through the whole election in America, that is really going to affect some people. You know, that was a big deal. It was a big, you know, it was a big deal for a lot of people in the world, but particularly for Americans. So I had clients going, hey, look, this is, you know, and I had clients being Americans are very open about it. And they were like, hey, yeah, this is quite a day. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. So we just take our time. If you need to take a break to do anything, please feel free to do so. Yeah,
fair enough. So I want to take a quick step back because I mean, I've recently kind of just taken a real interest in the gaming sphere. Like I've had, you know, success in other areas of voiceover, but realized that I basically need to learn voiceover from the ground up again for gaming because it is so different. But it's different from a level of the industry. And I want to just, if you could take us through, like, the different genres of gaming, because there's a massive difference between a mobile casual game and a AAA title. And so if you could just give us a spread of what exists out there.
Okay, this is going to be super general, Toby, because there is just, you know, I had this big conversation with my partner about the difference between roguelike and roguelite games yesterday, which is a whole, so we can go down to like granular, we won't. So I would say as a voice actor, there we go. As a voice actor, then you are probably looking at particularly in terms of rates and the sort of work that's out there, then I think, yeah, mobile games, obviously iOS games, but also Android games. Mobile games are its own sphere. Then very generally up from that, you've got games that are released for PC. So Steam-based games,
Steam being the platform on the PC.
Steam is the playing platform. So you'll see someone saying it's a Steam game. It means it's being published by Steam, which is software that will allow you to play, the platform that will allow you to play your game on your PC or your Mac. And then there's the Epic Game Store. There's other versions of that. And then console games. So we're thinking PS4, PS5, Xbox S, Xbox X. What are we up to? I don't know. So console games. And then you have what, in a very, very general sense, what we call emerging technologies, which is VR games and also AR games and XR games. So it's all augmented reality, virtual reality and augmented reality. So those are kind of three: mobile games, PC games, console games, and then new technology games, emerging technology games, if you like. So that's kind of your spread.
Right.
Yeah. So I would say in terms of, go for it.
And I was going to say, we often hear the title, the word AAA titles. Is that games that are released across multiple platforms? It's basically like the blockbuster movie of games.
Yeah.
So how do they fit in?
I'd say really when we say AAA, and this is a term that is massively debated within the gaming sphere, but I would say it's to do with budget really. Like a AAA game will definitely be released on console, whereas there are plenty of indie games out there, independent developers who are not backed by big publishers, tend to be smaller teams, and there are a lot of games which will start on a PC platform like Steam and then maybe get ported to a console in the future, if it's depending on sales and publicity and all the rest of that. And but I'd say AAA, if you say I'm going to be voicing a AAA game, generally that means that you've been cast in a game that will go straight to a console. So it'll be on PS4, PS5, Xbox. It'll go straight to the console, and that's how it's to do with budgets really. AAAs have huge budgets. There used to be like a more defined version of it, and I'm sure there's people out there who still work for it, which is AA means something else and A means something else. But generally, as a general speak, AAA is like a blockbuster movie is a really good equivalent correlation for that. I would say it's all about budgets really. It's about how much money goes into that game.
And a lot of money goes into games these days. It's outpacing the movie industry. It has for a number of years, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really, really has. Yeah.
Yeah. I hear about, the voice actors in a huge title such as The Last of Us 2 or, like Half-Life Alyx or something. They're getting paid as much as movie stars get in movies. Would that be fair?
I mean, I don't know what that sort of like you're talking about. So the voice actors in The Last of Us 2, like one of the
Baker.
Ashley Birches, Troy
Yep.
Baker.
Yep.
But you're talking about people who are like the very, very top of the gaming industry. Whether they're getting the kind of millions that movie stars make, I don't know. But these are people who are like right at the very top. So I don't think whatever they were paid. Also, it's not just voice acting those games; it was performance capture, so they were fully mocapped as well, and that's a whole different thing. So it's not just them behind a mic. Some of it would have been, but a lot of it will have been done in volumes, in motion capture volumes, full motion capture stages.
Basically,
So,
time-shifted
yeah.
movies, aren't they? Or they're sort of like they're that right between games and movies now, because you've got physical performance and audio performance, but it's also kind of time-shifted and player-dependent and all those kind of things.
Yeah, it's interactive, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's kind of it's a it's interactive. I guess you could say interactive film, but I'm kind of a bit wary about doing that kind of comparison between the two of them because games are so different. Games are not a linear, film is linear and games aren't. And it's very difficult to compare like a non-linear format to a linear format. That's just not a thing that kind of happens. It's not, once you, I mean, to give you a really good example as a voice actor from voice directing, like I might be recording, say, 80 lines of dialogue an hour with a particular actor. On a good day, it's probably, for an indie game, I probably do 60 to 70, maybe up to 90, depending. So lines per hour. And those 80 lines, 70 lines, 80 lines can be from any part of the game. So one line I could be asking you to be devastated because your daughter has been killed in front of you. And the next line, you're on the battlefield and you're about to stab someone in a completely unrelated incident. And the next line, you're having an argument with your wife at home, but it's over something really domestic. And it's just an argument that's happening in the background. It has nothing to do with the main action. It's just automated dialogue. It's just dialogue that triggers when you walk into a space as a player and you can hear people having a conversation in the background and you are recording one half of that conversation. And then the next two lines could be a completely different scene when you're outside and just farming. Talking to someone about farming. And that will all happen very quickly because in one session, because it's all from different parts of the game. So it's not, and as a voice actor, you have to be prepared for that kind of non-linearity. And I think, one of the reasons that people might get paid a lot of money to do a game is because the skill set is really, really high. It needs to be really high to keep all that in your head, be able to switch so quickly and give a convincing, believable, truthful performance. And in motion capture, you'll have to learn all your lines as well. And have a camera in front of your face.
So as a voice director, would you try and group those together like they do in audiobooks? They sometimes, voice all the narration first and then all the characters in sequence. And so there's more natural flow. Is that something that you're allowed to do or is it usually you go in and it's literally just here's a line, here's a line, here's a line, here's a line?
I mean, it really depends on the developers, it depends on the writers, it depends on where the script is in the process, it depends on when I'm recording it. So, and it just depends so much on the materials I'm given. So if I can, I will structure a session as much as I can in terms of, so we're not doing full emotion down, so everything can be a bit more grouped. But it's kind of, in terms of whether I can do complete scenes, sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. Sometimes I've recorded half of a scene and I have to go back and we have to re-record it, the rest of the scene 3 days later, because that's just the way the script's gone. Sometimes I can do a full scene. Sometimes I have to, on the bigger games, sometimes I'm handing over to a completely different director. So I've directed half a scene and then somebody else is going to take over and direct that. Just because of the way, just because I need to go off and direct something else. So as much as possible, I try and make things as easy for my actors as possible, but sometimes it's just not something that can be easily done.
And I imagine part of the skill set is also being able to match prior performances, because I watched something online about how, these bigger games especially go through sort of like an editorial process where often there's multiple passes and things change in scenes. And so, people have to come back and revoice in the same scene and match other things that they've done before.
Yeah, absolutely. We do a lot of, particularly on games with performance capture and motion capture, we do a lot of note taking. We take screenshots of things if we think that we're going to have to match it or match it in the future. We do a lot of voice references. I take a lot of notes, and I'm pretty meticulous on the bigger games. If I know that I might not be directing this scene, then I will take notes. I did one recently for somebody. We came out with, there was a scene we hadn't done before. It was very, very large. We knew we weren't going to get through it an entire in the 4-hour slot we had. So we made notes. We took screenshots. We made notes about audio clips. We put notes to the sound team going, please, we need references for these particular lines. I noted the lines I wanted, so then I can hand over to someone and say, here are your vocal references. This is the energy they were using at this particular point. And the performance director, the motion director would be, this is how they were standing. This is what they were doing. We decided that we put the tree on their left side, that they're going to be leaning on their left side. That's where the tree is. We've checked that with the cinematics team, that kind of thing. So yeah, that sort of, that continuity, and expecting the actor to be able to do that as well. And, going, right, we're going to play you 3 samples of the last character you did. And the last time you did this character was 3 months ago. We've now got 6 lines for this character. Here's samples. Cool. You got it? Brilliant. Let's go. Yeah. So, and that's quite, that's quite a challenge as well. But yes, matching performances is something that we do. Also pickups for games. There was a game I directed which wrapped a few weeks ago. There will be pickups in a couple of weeks, and I'll be asking actors to do exactly that. Hi, here's a reference of what you did. I'd like you to replicate this character, please.
Yeah.
Go.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we use references, audio references and visual references quite a lot. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So, I mean, I get approached by many people come for voice training who have played The Last of Us, or they've played. I mean, I keep coming back to that because so many people are inspired by that game.
No. It's a massive touch point for the industry as well. So it's absolutely. Yeah.
And a lot of them are, I want to be a character voice in video games. How do I go about that? And I often sort of tell them, I'm sort of like, it's great that you really want to be into it, and it is such a great fun thing. But like, everyone wants to do this. Like, there are so many people that want to get into it. I guess if you could outline like what the entry points are for people into the gaming industry, because it's not like you're going to walk off the street and be cast in a AAA game title. There's probably going to be some kind of ladder or some kind of progression through the industry. What's your advice when people say, oh, I want to get into gaming?
Okay, so first and foremost, you need to be able to act. And that sounds really obvious, but it's an acting job. It is voice acting is obviously different from theatre. It's different from stage, different from screen, but it is acting. And I work with actors. So if you don't, I'm not snobby. I don't mind what your acting background is, whether you classically trained at a drama school, or whether you trained through voice acting work and you went to character workshops and you trained with coaches. Whether you come from an improv background, I don't mind. I'm not fussed about what your journey is to get there. What I'm interested in, both as a director and when I'm casting, is, can you act? Are you an actor? So I would say, one of the things that people say to me quite a lot is, oh, I can do really great accents, or I can do a range of different character voices. And I'm honestly, for gaming, I'm not that interested in that. Accents can be incredibly useful. They really can. But what I'm interested in first and foremost is, can you act? Do you have a range as an actor? I'm not there. There are a ton of people out there who can do accents, and most of the time I'm looking for native standard accents anyway. And I will cast people's native from their native accents first. Particularly for significant roles, but mostly it's the first I would say is, can you act? Because that's the first entry point, really. The second kind of, there's sort of various flavors of it. At the top end, so AAA games, for example, or high-end indie games, what some people call AAA games. So for example, Hellblade, which came out, had binaural. It was really well known for binaural sound. But it's that was what they called a AAA game. It was a high-end indie game. So for high-end games where there's a lot of focus on the character performance and the acting, a lot of that I will cast through agents. In the UK, I use Spotlight quite a lot. In the US, it's agents, essentially. I will go to agents simply because agents, especially the decent agents, will employ actors. So voice agents or acting agents, I mainly go through voice agents simply because I know them better, but I have gone through acting agents as well. And they, you know, a lot of those calls for those AAA games will go out to high-end agents. So it's not, I mean, it would be tricky to kind of that. I mean, that is where the gatekeep is for those high-end games. I definitely have heard of people who have been cast in games and they're not represented by a top agent, but generally they have some kind of other contact. Very, very occasionally I'm asked to source like a real person, like a real newsreader. Or
right.
a real you know, baseball commentator or something, you know, but that's the sort of thing where I would go to then. That's kind of like sports managers. That's a whole different, or news, you know, or people who represent newsreaders. I can't remember who I went to for that, but that's a different kind of thing. But mainly if I'm looking for actors, I'm going to agents. So that's a AAA, but high-end indies, like it's not, we've definitely, you know, I've worked with actors based in New Zealand. Again, I have gone through agents. So I've worked with actors through agents, simply because for that kind of top end kind of work, I mean, I'd love to do open casting calls for people, but firstly, I don't have time. And secondly, the problem with open casting calls is that it's just, you will probably find some gems, but you will find a lot of stuff that you have to wade through where people are just starting out or not know what they're doing, or, oh, I've got a nice voice, I'll record this audition on my iPhone, you know, even though it's been asked for a professional home studio, that kind of thing. And it's just, what agents gives me as a casting director and director is it just narrows the field to very good people.
Totally.
And even at that point, I'm still, you know, wading through a lot of auditions anyway. So I would say that is quite a big thing for those high-end games. It is a climb, you know, to get up there. But, you know, there are definitely people who I've worked with on smaller games who have not come through that kind of way. There are a lot of, the gaming industry is enormous. And there's a lot of games out there, like I said, mobile games, PC games. A lot of the smaller independent development studios look for actors directly. They don't go through agents necessarily. They put calls out on Twitter, and they look for people directly. So it is perfectly possible, and I know people who've done this, who have got work in games, good indie games, through developing personal relationships and specific relationships with developers. And I don't mean just spamming, you know, every indie developer in your city with, hey, here's my voice reel, please book me. But actually taking time to get to know what they're looking for and what they want. And that is perfectly possible. And I know people who've done that.
Yeah, it's possible to
and then
move
you can work your way
sideways.
from there.
Yeah, so it's possible to sort of move sideways in the industry. Like if there is a game development company and you have skills that are kind of, you know, adjacent to that, can people sort of, you know, get into the industry in a different way and then move sideways, as sometimes happens? Like, could you be a writer or a game developer and then be like, I also do voice acting, or you know, you're around the people then?
I mean, it's kind of rarer, I think. I think that happens a little bit more in other game disciplines. For voice acting, not so much, simply because acting is such a it's quite, I mean, all of these skills you mentioned are definitely specific, don't get me wrong, but really I would say it would be very, very rare for me to find someone who was, I've talked to a lot of people who are like, yeah, I'd like to give that a go, but it is very much, I'd like to give that a go. I did a bit of BAM did a bit of theatre at university, that kind of thing. And I think, I mean, occasionally I've come across games where a developer's gone, hey, do you mind, like, you know, Jim from accounting, really, you know, such a good guy. He just really wants to, really want to use someone from the company in a cameo. Can you just do these 2 lines? I mean, that's definitely happened before. There's lots of stories of people just casting their mates, but generally that doesn't work out well in terms of the acting's not very good.
Yeah.
I'd say moving sideways, also bearing in mind that for a lot of games that are made, the developers, the studio, aren't the ones doing the voice recording or the casting or directing. They have outsourced that to an audio outsourcer, a studio that handles that separately. Some game studios have their own audio team in-house, like Blizzard being a very good example, because it's enormous. They've got dedicated voice directors and dedicated casting. You know, they've got dedicated studios. They've got their thing. Creative Assembly, who are based in Sussex in the UK, they've got their own in-house studios. They do all their casting, recording, dialogue in-house. But someone like Naughty Dog might not.
Right.
You know, I don't actually. Yeah.
So those are called audio outsourcing companies, or just outsourcing companies?
Audio outsourcing companies.
Right.
Yeah. Audio outsourcers as a generic term.
And is it worth voiceover artists, aspiring gaming artists, getting in touch with those and saying, here I am, here's my gaming reel?
Sure. I mean, I would say that just be aware that a lot of them, like the UK has last count probably half a dozen, 8-ish, probably half a dozen, I would say. And not all of them like to be emailed cold. So I would say just do a bit of research before you do that, because that you might, shoot yourself in the foot if you just drop them in an email. I would say all of them also, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I would just check to see how they prefer to be contacted. I mean, I work for different outsourcing companies. Some of them are perfectly happy to be emailed. Some of them say, look, we only work through agents anyway. So if you've got an agent, we can definitely put that agent on the list, and we will send them casting opportunities, but we don't accept cold approaches from voice actors. Do your research. I would say as well, just bear in mind that because I know a lot of viewers will be based in New Zealand and Australia, just bear in mind that they will be looking for local talent. A lot of these audio outsourcers are they're in the UK, they're in the US, and they will look to those markets first, because that's where the directors and the clients are based. So that's not to kind of say don't do it. Like I say, I have worked with people all over the world. I've directed people all over the world. But I have never so far directed someone I haven't directed someone in Australia who's doing a British accent for me.
Right. Yeah, right.
For a game.
Is that changing with COVID, do you think? Because now everyone's on the same platform and geography's kind of slightly out the window.
It's the time difference, to be honest.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's not. The platform doesn't really make yes, everybody, which is great, but it'll be mainly the time differences, and just because the relationships you have with the different agencies. So I have relationships with UK agencies. I know US agencies. I don't know that much. I know a couple of one or two New Zealand agents. I don't know that many Australian. I know who they are. I know who I could get in contact with. But I mean, when you live in a global market like LA, like London, you can get a lot of accents, native people who just live there already. And it's to do with where the client is and how things are based, and whether somebody's prepared to direct at 1:30 in the morning, which I've done. But it's about, so I would say that if you are coming from Australia and New Zealand, just be aware that your strengths are going to be your own native accents. Your native accents. It is really useful if I hear something on somebody's reel where it's like, oh, brilliant. So they're clearly, they've got a standard Australian accent. That's brilliant. Great. I can hear a slightly more Bogan accent. That's really useful. But, oh, great. They can also do a really great standard South African accent. Oh, I can hear that a decent RP on there. That's useful. They're not going to be the first people I reach for a South African or an RP accent, but it is useful to know that if I did want to cast them in a game, that they could potentially pick up other characters in those accents. That's very useful to know. But I will not it would be the only times I've ever cast it's rare for me to cast outside of the geography, so far outside of the geography of a client, unless they're looking for a very, very specific voice, which does happen. Don't get me wrong. But I think it's just something to bear in mind, that there is it might be a better bet for, if you are in a particular market, that you reach out to people within your own market first. And then when you've got an established kind of, here are the titles I've been in, here are the characters I've voiced, then you start reaching out to bigger audio outsourcers. Because I think the other thing you need to remember as well is that the audio outsourcers in the UK and the US, there are, there's hundreds, thousands of actors, tens of thousands of actors out there. Like you say, it's very, very competitive. So what would you have to, if you are going to make my life slightly more challenging, if you like, in the sense that I have to take into account a 13-hour time difference, I am going to need to hear something that nobody else can give me from the UK or the US. There has to be something special on there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It has to be something that will make me go, you know what? This is great. And it does happen. There's definitely been times when I've worked with people from all over the world because they specifically the client wanted something specific, which is great. But for me to sit up and pay attention to, it's got to be, and that will be the same for the audio outsourcing companies. It's got to be something like, oh, brilliant. A Fiji Indian voice.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
doesn't come along that much, but it could be really useful.
Like New Zealanders are sometimes considered a bit of a unicorn in that sense, because not only is our accent, it's kind of unusual, it's become trendy because of the Flight of the Conchords, but it's also incredibly difficult to do because our vowels are just all over the place. So do New Zealanders have some kind of advantage, and to some extent Australians?
Only if there's a game that wants a New Zealand accent, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to generalize, and apologies to anybody watching from the UK and America, but a lot of British and American people can't tell the difference between it anyway.
It's true.
So it's not, I'm a Kiwi, obviously. So it's kind of, but that's been my experience. So I would say if I'm casting a New Zealand voice, I am looking for a New Zealander. I'm not looking for someone who can do a New Zealand accent, because like you say, it's really, really hard to do. So it's kind of, it's difficult to get right. So I'm definitely looking for a New Zealander, but as an advantage, I honestly don't know. Like, potentially if the game was set in New Zealand and I needed someone to cover, if I knew I had a game and I was like, right, I need to cover maybe the Luminaires has been made into a video game. So it's and I need to cover like New Zealand, potentially Australian. I need some Irish in there. I need some RP. I'd probably go to New Zealand. I might go to New Zealand actors first, simply because the hardest accent on that list I knew could be covered off, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, totally.
So that's the sort of thing. But in terms of it's different from corporate and commercial, because I know I get used as like, trans-Pacific, sort of voice, that kind of thing, like quite a neutral sound. And I think that definitely works in New Zealanders' favor, not when it comes with games though. I'd say there's probably more work for New Zealand actors working in, Australia, but there's more work working in Australian, to be honest. Like being a native Kiwi is brilliant.
I totally agree. Yeah.
But working in there's far more gaming work in an Australian accent out there, far more. Just there's not compared to like RP and US, American and British accents, nothing. But in terms of the opportunities that are out there, I mean, I've looked for across my casting for this year, I've probably had to source out maybe sort of 6 or 7 Australian roles, I think.
Yeah, what kind of percentages, out of interest? American, Brit, and then other South African, Indian.
Okay, so out of the games that I've directed this year, I'd say probably, like, just because one of them is enormous, so probably 60% British accents, maybe 35% American, and 5% everybody else.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I've done a little bit, like I've done a couple of I did in Africa, like a couple of African, Nigerian, Australian, New Zealand, and then a couple of other sort of slightly more specific accents. Well, not sort of specific, but just slightly
unusual
variations on unusual accents. Yeah. So I would say, so I would say, like, one of my big tips for people really is that the 2 major accents out there that developers want are still like RP neutral British and standard American.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd concur with that. On the sort of, where these voices come from front, I heard you mention in an interview that gamers would never post these on, gaming companies or casting directors would never post them on pay-to-play sites. I think I know why, but why is that?
Okay, so that is it was a bit of a kind of there are definitely gaming companies, gaming devs out there who do post on pay-to-play. So it was more me going, serious games, as in like high-end games, don't post on pay-to-play because of the quality control. So I talked about the reason that I go to agents is because if I posted it in a global, like an open call, I would get flooded by hundreds of submissions, and probably 20% of those I could just discard, just because they would be terrible, not just not acting wise, but wrong format, badly labeled, recorded with terrible recording quality, that kind of thing. So and game developers don't have a lot of time, so they would rather hand that kind of process over. And the problem is with posting on a pay-to-play site is just the quality control. And you just end up with a lot of people who can't act, because a lot of pay-to-play sites, there's the thing, they're voiceover sites, they're not acting sites necessarily.
Yeah, it's
So
true.
I'm thinking about things, you know, like, so voice123voices.com, Badalgo, they are all voiceover sites. Something like Mandy is very slightly different because it's got an acting thing as well as a voiceover thing. So I've definitely seen some game devs post on Mandy in the acting as opposed to the voiceover. But I would say it's a quality control thing. It's not that I don't think that there are good people, good talent working out there. I do think that there are good talent working on those sites, but it's going to take me so long to find them. If I post something on a pay to play, I just have to be like prepared to get through a lot of bollocks, you know? And I unfortunately, that's just time. And I don't have that. I'd rather make the general standard of my submissions better. That doesn't mean that when I go to agents, everything any agent sends me is going to be amazing. Like I definitely have, I get, every time I put an audition out, I give it my kind of very general 20%. Like I say, if any audition, I can just cut 20% off the bottom. Usually it is to do with submitting. People just don't label files. They send me stuff in really odd formats, really strange stuff, or they just haven't read the instructions properly. Like I've said, please shoot, you know, it's a mocap audition, please shoot, you know, a certain framing. A certain frame, and they've just done their head, you know, it's just a headshot. And I'm like, cool, okay, well, that's not useful. And I'd love to be able to go back to people and say, can you redo this? But generally don't have time.
No time. Yeah, exactly.
No time. Bye-bye. So so I would say that is the pay to play. It's a quality control issue. If I had more time, I would do, but a lot of the stuff I do is turn around so quickly. I need to have like a baseline to start with, if you like. I need someone else to do that quality for me, and that's what agents have already done.
Yeah, exactly.
They've accepted good people on their books, and I can go through. And the other thing that pay to plays don't give me is that they don't give me somebody's whole idea as an actor. Whereas what agent sites will do is that they give me a little bit of bio about them. Maybe they give me their spotlight link, so I can go up and in the UK, I can go up and have a look at this actor's CV. Or if it's the US, you know, I can look them up on their website and know that if I go to someone like Atlas or Vox, you know, that they are going to have a certain quality, because to get signed by those agencies is difficult. So they've done that for me. You know, they've done that kind of quality for me. And then it's just about me going, are you right for this role? Have you got the kind of voice? Okay, yep, let's get you an audition. That's the main reason, really. It's not because I'm a massive snob about it. You know, as a director.
It's entirely logistical, isn't it? It's a logistical decision.
It's a very logistical decision. There is no way that pay to plays can guarantee, just simply because of the way they're created and their money, the way they make money, they can't guarantee that kind of quality. There is no, you know,
it's more about aspiring. It's more about aspiring voiceovers than you know. They supply like services to aspiring voiceovers as well as to the industry. So it's kind of like it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. And even if you pay the big bucks to be listed top and get the top auditions of these pay to play sites, for me, that's no guarantee you're going to be any good. That's just the guarantee that you can afford to pay $5,000 or whatever,
exactly.
You know?
Totally.
So it's that kind of, so that's the big thing for me. I don't have that kind of, that kind of time. And I would love to be able to do more for aspiring people. But the other thing is as well, is that because games move at such a high rate, I need someone to be at the top of their game when they walk into the room. You know, I need them to be like, I totally understand as a director, people are new to games, that's fine. Obviously we give them as much as possible, but I do need people to hit a certain standard, because I don't have time. I would love to work with you over, you know, a few days or weeks. I'd love to have a rehearsal with you, but the majority of games I do, that is just not a luxury I have. You know, I need you to hit something really, really quickly. And again, I just don't have that development time. I'd love to be able to develop new actors, but that's what the agents sign people who have been through that process with drama school or with coaches or with, you know, workshops or what have you. They've already done all that background. So yeah. And also just one final thing on that is just, I mean, like you said, it's incredibly competitive, and it's just, you know, there is a certain amount to be said for the people who have already gone and put in the work as actors. They've already worked their way up in that kind of area. I mean, I don't, while I would love to give someone who is just starting out an opportunity, why would I not go for someone who is more experienced? They have already put the work in. And I would say, yeah, I mean, a lot of this is privilege. A lot of this is luck. A lot of it, there's a lot of things that go on there. And I totally understand that. But yeah, I would say to people,
every time you cast someone, you're effectively putting yourself on the line as a casting director as well. So you need to be sure that they're going to perform under pressure.
Yeah. And I mean, I've taken risks on people. Absolutely. I've taken risks on people when I wasn't quite sure that they were right for the job. And I do champion people as much as I can. But also a lot of the time, and I don't know whether a lot of voice actors who aren't in the industry who aren't working games know this, but the final decision isn't up to me. Like, I will give my recommendations. Here are the people I think I could do. A lot of the time, the client will turn around and go, no, I like them. And you're like, oh, okay, that isn't who I would choose, but sure, okay, that's fine. And they are adamant they want them, and you're just like, okay, well, I liked A and B, and they're like, no, I like F. And you're like, F was not my first choice, but cool. And you just have to, and there's, at the end of the day, it's the people with the money who are making the decisions, and that's not the casting director either. Which is why I tell people who are wanting to aspire to get into voicing for games that you do approach smaller independent developers, smaller people working, in 2 or 3 person teams, making really cool games, who don't want to go to agents because they don't want to have to deal with agents who do not know actors and will be looking for actors. Making relationships with those people, that's good, because they will be willing, they'll be happy to have you on board, and that's how you can build up. I'm not saying that there is a lower barrier, but there is that gatekeeping of agents is removed from indie games simply because a lot of them are quite happy to deal one-on-one with actors.
Exactly, yeah.
I would say.
And I suppose, even though you're commanding a much lower fee, of course, as you would, you're also getting, as a voice artist, you're getting that experience in a session and to see how it works and everything. So that's the first step in the ladder.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. And that's invaluable. Like the fact if an actor comes into the studio, if an actor through my headphones, if I'm talking to an actor and they're in a different studio and I say to them, have you done any games before? Now I try and research my actors as much as possible. If I haven't worked with them before, I'll look them up. I'll look up their websites or on Spotlight so I can get an idea of where they're coming in from. I get really, really worried if I cannot find an actor online. That has happened, or I can just find their Facebook profile or whatever. If you don't have some kind of a website or somewhere that I can see what you've done in the past, I get quite worried about that because you are then a completely unknown quantity. But the first thing I do is often, if I can see nothing's flagged that they've done games before, I will ask them, and if they say yes, I'm like, great. Immediately, it's not like a minus against anybody who hasn't done a game, but that just takes a weight off my shoulders because I'm like, right, so you know what we're doing here, right? We've got these lines to record, and they're like, yep. So this is an RPG. And they know what that means. You're playing a secondary characters. You're playing about 3 different NPCs. And they immediately know they've done it before. They know the drill. They know it's not linear. They know we'll be jumping around. They know it moves quickly. They've got an idea of what's going on, and that is really invaluable.
There's no education from your point of view, so it can be much more efficient. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And you can get that at any level of games, really. I mean, speed comes from the higher end games, but you can get that kind of understanding of what people are looking for in game performance. You can get that at any level, really. Mobile games, you can get it at AAAs, you can get it at PC games. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we are getting towards an hour, which this has gone so quickly. I can't believe how quickly it's gone, but there's been such good info in there. I've got some questions from our members who have written in.
Yeah, great.
So the first one is, how do you manage multiple projects at a time? How do you keep your sort of head in the right space for multiple different titles?
As a director?
And I guess when you're directing and casting as well, yeah. Probably.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, most games, it's a really good question. Sometimes I ask myself that, how does this happen? Most of the time, the games that, fortunately, a lot of the games, because every game is quite different, then the approach is quite different. I'm very organized. I have a lot of different folders and a lot of different casting projects. So I have different like Google Drive folders for everything. What I do personally is that I will block out time. So I will make sure, if I can possibly avoid it, sometimes it's not always possible, but I will always give myself at least half an hour to an hour between directing sessions if I'm going off to a different game. So if I know that I'm directing a RPG, set in medieval times in in Germany, and I know that I'm going to begin that session from 9 till 1, then I'll make sure as much as possible, if then my next game is a first-person shooter platformer set in the wastelands of the Ukraine, then I'll make sure that I give myself at least half an hour to an hour between those sessions, so I can reset. I can open up all my materials. I can look at who I'm recording with that day. Have I worked with them before? And just get back. I will probably watch some, if it's a game that if I'm doing DLC content, so additional content, then I might watch some of the gameplay just to remember the styles. I will listen to samples or watch video samples if it's a mocap game. So I give myself a bit of a time to go into it. One of the things, I use Slack a lot. A lot of the game industry uses Slack as a workspace. It's and so I will look up, I will go into that team Slack, that different developers Slack, whatever channels we're using, just, catch myself up, get myself back in. But audio and video samples to me are really, really useful. Just being able to listen to people's voices and go, that's what we did.
Like touchstones.
Yeah, touchstones, exactly. Oh, it's that tone. That's good. Okay, that's what we did. I generally do my script prep if I get the scripts far in advance. I'll do it the night before or the day before, but often, my session, I had a session earlier this week where it was 10 minutes to the session starting and the writer's emailing me and going, we've just got some more lines. So that's really common. And you're just like, common, we're just gonna run with it. So that's how I would keep a lot of good organization. And giving myself space and time between directing sessions and using video and audio references as touchstones are all my
cool.
the ways I try and switch between them. Yeah.
Nice. What would be a role that you would love to do if given a chance?
Ooh. Do you know, I would really love to combine voice directing with voice designing. So a voice designer in games, designs voices. Obviously creature voices is the kind of go-to, but also a lot of games I work on, we use some of the games I've worked on have been very straightforward, and some of them have used quite specific voice designs of different characters to evoke certain things and to make the player feel a certain way. I'd really, really love to work on a game where I could be both a voice director and a voice designer. Excuse me, and combine both my sound design and my voice direction skills on that. I think that would be really, really cool. That would be cool. That would be something.
And it's just gotten to me thinking, because we haven't touched on this at all in this interview, but the role of like AI voices. There was a recent thing with the first AI voice cast in a game that showed emotion and all that kind of stuff. But it's been poo-pooed by
AI.
Yeah, the crying AI. And now every advert's sad in the world. But like, do you think that it is going to affect the industry in the next 10 years, say, as a tool for voice designing?
I think not so much as yes, I think it's absolutely going to affect the industry. I don't think voice design is probably where it's going to affect so much, because a lot of voice design is about creating monstrous voices and taking things but also playing with emotions more than AIs can cope with at the moment, and combining different facets of the human voice that AIs can't do at the moment. Where I really think AI is going to take off is that on the level of games at the moment, where games either what I call, I don't know whether there's a technical term for this, but part voicing. So they don't completely voice lines. You get voiceover in it in terms of just emotes. So sighs and that kind of thing, where it's just, or maybe just grunts, fighting noises, efforts, that kind of thing. I think, and then there's games that kind of only partially voice, but there's also games where it's very, very straightforward voicing, still acting. But I mean, there's games I've done which are like big MMORPGs where you're basically going, my arrows fly kind of thing, and a lot of it is very high pitched and often American accents, and it's very straightforward, like, it's warrior, I will fight, that kind of like really straightforward stuff. I think things like that, those sort of games where they do want an element of voiceover, but they don't want to have to pay the budget for casting lots of actors. There are, there's 200 characters, but they might only have like half a dozen lines each, and they're very short ones like that. I will fight. No, I will be here, kind of thing. I think that's where the AI community is going to AI.
And possibly like
a
combination of like, if you take like Grand Theft Auto, for example, where you could walk up to anyone and start a conversation, you could combine that with like a chat bot and an AI voice. So you could, meet people in this virtual world that then speak to you, and it's always completely random.
Yeah, there's already games that use generated, personalized generation like that. Right. I've heard them. It's not like no one's fooling. You're not fooled that it's human at the moment. There was something that Google did actually. I asked this question of developers in the UK relatively recently, whether anybody out there was using this sort of stuff. There are a lot of developers using AI voice as scratch voicing for games, for animation timings. Google something.
Yeah, what's it called? Not
Can't
Togatron.
remember. No, there's an Amazon version as well, and I can't remember what it's called. But there's an AI engine, and they're not using it. They're not implementing it in game at the moment because it's not good, and it's scratch voicing. But they are very getting. It's more. I was really interested in the fact that there are companies out there who are getting very comfortable with it.
Yeah,
and I don't doubt.
I guess. Yeah,
exactly, and I don't doubt that when that technology gets good enough, there are definitely going to be games out there who go, well, we could hire professional actors, but also it's the games where, like, one of the games I know who is using like the scenario you described, they're okay with it sounding kind of robotic because it works for the mechanics of their game, and it works for their game.
If it's sci-fi,
exactly. So if so if it's a game, if the developers are like, actually, what's important, the voiceover is not like the voice acting isn't as important to us. We're okay if it's not exactly like, if it doesn't sound exactly like a human. It sounds human enough. And actually our focus is on the gameplay mechanics or the art or the cinematics or the frame rate or whatever. So they're actually, the quality of the voiceover is kind of lower down on their priorities. Those are going to be the sort of games where the money people are going to go, well, you could make this kind of saving if we just use AI voices. And if you think your target audience are just going to accept that, I mean, I don't think the quality is quite there yet on AIs, but I don't think it's that far off. So I did get actually marketed by one of these companies as well, which I thought was hilarious recently. They sent me an email marketing, advertising it. And I'm like, you're advertising something that will potentially put me out of a job in the future. Hilarious.
Exactly. Yeah, that's mistargeted, isn't it? Final question, since we're running out of time, and it's about voice reels. Given the variety of types of games there are, is it best to make 2 voice reels, one that's dramatic and another that's more caricature? And what about a creature reel? What are your thoughts on getting variety reels to broaden the scope of potential roles?
Very good question.
Very good question.
For a gaming reel, I'm not looking for caricature at all. I want real acting. So I want, something dramatic. You can definitely put humor in there, but I don't want anything that kind of ends up in animation. So look at it this way. This is the difference that I've always said about animation and gaming, as someone who's directed both and produced demos for both for quite a number of years. For me, so animation, one of the big things about animation is that it's funny. It needs to be funny. Animation, animated series, animated movies, yes, they can be touching, they can be sincere, they can be educational, but above all of that, they need to be entertaining, they need to make the audience laugh. Humor is a massive drive for animation. Now, what a 2-year-old finds funny in, like, Hey Dougie, and what a 12-year-old finds funny in I don't know what a 12-year-olds listen to watch these days. Rick and Morty, is that a 12-year-old thing? Anyway, probably is that a bit old. What a 12-year-olds watch. Okay, The Loud House, that might be actually younger. Clearly, I don't know. And what a 21-year-old finds funny is obviously going to be very, very different depending on what your age range is like. But animation humor is the big drive for animation. It needs to. That's why it's zany and over the top, and you make really big choices when you're animation acting. You make choices so that your audience will laugh. Gaming is interactive and is an experience. And although a character can tell jokes, generally games are not very funny. There are comedy games out there, absolutely, but the majority of it is quite dramatic. And I am looking for, and I always say this, ordinary people in extraordinary situations.
Yeah, that's a good
That's
way to
what I'm
sum it
looking
up.
for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the
Ordinary
nuance
people
of everyday life, I suppose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I want to hear, like, take it The Last of Us as a great example. Now, Joel is an ordinary guy in an extraordinary situation. Ordinary guy, you know, trying to take care of his daughter, zombie apocalypse. You know, it's that kind of situation. You know, there's a lot of Firewatch, brilliant game. The lead character, I can't remember who plays him, but he's a very good actor. The player character, the backstory of that is that his wife develops early onset dementia, I think, and she doesn't appear very much in the game, but she has to go back to Australia, and he takes a job in California in like the 1980s, being a fire watchman, sitting in a tower in a big national park like Yellowstone. You know, because he's had this incredibly traumatic personal thing happen to him, and he just takes a job in the middle of nowhere in a national park. You know, ordinary man, extraordinary situation. Great start for a game. And there's, so all those human interactions. So gaming reels, I want to hear human experience. I want to hear your range of human experience. Now, you can definitely put some fantasy stuff in there. You could be a fantasy game, but I want to hear a range of games. I want to hear a range of energies, a range of emotions. Do everything. Accents, great. Caricatures, no. You can have more characterful characters, absolutely, but they have to be interesting. I don't want to hear your cowboy voice because you can do a really great Texas accent. I want to hear someone that could have come out of Red Dead Redemption 2. That's what I want to hear. Does that make sense?
Another question. That does make. Do you need to familiarize yourself with the genre by playing games?
So you don't have to be. You don't have to be a great game player to be a great game voice actor, but you do have to have a really good appreciation for games. So no, I don't expect. I mean, if you play games, brilliant. But I'm aware that people have kids. You know, it's not much time.
Lives.
You don't have a lot. Lives. People don't have time, and people might not be particularly into games, and that is absolutely fine. I would say gameplay. If you don't have time to play games or no real interest in it, game playthroughs and walkthroughs on YouTube and cinematics. Just a tip. Choose a playthrough or walkthrough that has no commentary on it. Otherwise, you will end up with a 19-year-old American talking over the top of it.
There are millions of those, literally.
So many. Twitch as well. Twitch streamers are good for that sort of thing. So I would say watch them. If you don't want to play them, absolutely fine. Also, games are, AAA games are expensive. So, that's fair enough.
And the consoles.
But I would... and the consoles, exactly. So I don't expect people to drop like 50 quid on a game, it's not. But I would say that if you are being cast in a game and you have an idea of, style, if you're completely new to it or you want to get more work in games, familiarize yourself. Just, Google top 10 games of 2020, go onto YouTube, look up walkthroughs, playthroughs, and cut scenes or cinematics, which are the little videos that you have in game, the little films that play in the game. So don't have to play them, but I would say watching them would be really useful. If somebody comes along and goes, an actor says to me, I don't really play games, I don't really watch them. I'm like, what are you doing here then?
You've got to have some kind of passion for it.
Yeah, some kind of passion. There's a lot of people out there who want to do this job, mate. So, you better, and obviously I wouldn't say that to their face, but in the back of my head, I'm thinking, so why are you here? Why don't you just go out and do whatever you want to do? Like, if you don't have any interest in games, why are you in front of me trying to pretend you care? Yeah.
Very good.
Harsh, but
well, thank you so much for your time today. I've still got so many things that I thought we'd cover, but it's been so saturated with content. It's been brilliant. We must do this again, maybe next year sometime. Yeah,
absolutely. Sorry, Toby. I get incredibly, as you can hear, incredibly enthusiastic about my job. Very happy. Really lovely to talk to you.
Absolutely. I'd love
the miles.
Just to finish off. What's the thing that you'd love people to see of your work that you thought, damn, I did a good job on that, directing, whatever.
So two things, the two games that I'm most proud of, I can't tell you anything about them apart from the names, but Destruction All Stars is going to come out on PS5 next year, and I'm super proud of that, of the work, the acting work on that, and the characters, which I can't tell you anything about, but you can look up you can look up that up on YouTube. It's really fun. And Baldur's Gate 3, I was one of the voice directors in the dialogue recording team for Baldur's Gate 3, which has come out, which has been released for early access, and that's been a marathon for all of us involved. Massively proud of what our team has done for that. That was for all our motion capture and voice work on that. So those are the two gaming projects I'm really proud of. I get people, it's really lovely to hear people go, oh my God, I played Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. And no, I can't wait to, to get stuck into Baldur's Gate 3. So that's really lovely. There's a lot of stuff about that online. And that was a real privilege. It's been a real privilege, still is a privilege to be part of that and working closely with Larry and the studio behind it. So that's probably, it was, I would say, those for the projects. I mean, those are the only two I can talk about at the moment that I've done this year.
Lots of NDAs.
Lots of NDAs.
Yeah,
Gaming is full of NDAs. But those two games are really Distraction All Stars and Baldur's Gate 3 are my two this year that I've been really proud of working on.
Fantastic.
So people can they're very different as well. Which is
what's your website for people to find out more about you?
www.soundswild.com. Sounds as an SOUNDS and wild WILDE, like Oscar Wilde.
Oscar Wilde. Fantastic.
Like Oscar Wilde. So you can find out more about that. But you can always, I'm on Twitter more than anywhere else.
Cool.
And occasionally on Instagram.
Nice.
But at the moment there's nothing. Honestly, I don't post on Instagram much because it's just really boring photos of like, hi, this is me in front of my microphone directing, can't tell you what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it's not that. But I'm on Twitter more than it. You can find me on Twitter talking exciting stuff about games.
Nice.
Mainly.
Funnily enough. Yeah. Fantastic.
Funnily enough, yeah.
Wonderful.
That's it.
Thank you so much for your time, and I wish you all the best for the next season. And let's have a chat next year. I'd love to ask you some more questions.
That'd be lovely, Toby. I would love to. And I hope everything's fine. I know it's fine in New Zealand. My family keep telling me.
Exactly, yeah. And Australia's not too bad as well, so it's a nice part of the world to be in, at least. So
yeah. Maybe I can come over in person now. I was supposed to come over in October, but that wasn't wasn't supposed to happen.
No.
But,
Next year, probably.
Yeah. Next year.
Seems more likely, doesn't it? Yeah. Good stuff.
Cool.
All
Okay,
right.
thanks so much, Toby.
Thanks for your
See you
time.
later.
Cheers.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.